party. All right.
Graduate school at the same time, Michelle?
We did, yep.
So consider us live. But let me just...
Get back.
Here we are. Only 15 minutes late. We're okay.
It's okay.
I think 15 minutes is fashionably late.
Yeah.
There we go.
I don't think late is the right word, but as a matter of fact.
Delayed.
It's a new word that we have to learn what it is.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we are live. Lauren is gonna just
Hello.
the feed. I just heard the echoes. That's good. You're live on both Facebook and YouTube. Yeah. Thank you all. We're going to start any minute. On what, Facebook? Do the caster check. One second.
Lost our
Chris, they can
MC.
hear you.
Oh.
Chris? Oh.
All right.
Chris,
Yes,
they can hear you.
I know. Well, all right. Well, let's just proceed, and then you can always put it back up on Facebook afterward. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. All right. So Kathleen, if you would like to take it away.
Okay, great.
Well, you know,
Hi,
sorry,
everyone.
Can you make me the host? Sorry.
Can I make you the host?
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry. You can just right click on
can
me.
you tell me how to make you the host?
Just right click back.
You know
on
it's me. Do what?
Just right
stop.
click on my feed.
Okay, it's not working. It's not working, Chris.
So I'm sorry, just click on participants at the bottom.
Okay.
Mhm.
You're not listed.
And then you should see me on the side as,
I'm on here twice, but you're not listed.
there we go, now I am.
Now you are.
Sorry. There's Kate, she's going
Make
to
host. Got it. All right.
my host.
You are now host.
Thank you all for dealing with our technical difficulties. We are going to start. Thank you.
Go. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. Good evening. My name is Kathleen Durkin, and I'm the CEO here at the ARC Baltimore, and it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight. So I'm not staying long because I know we're all looking forward to hearing directly from our curators about the art that they've selected for this year's Art in the Round. But I want to start by thanking each of you for your continued support of the ARC Baltimore and this year's virtual Art in the Round event. We were so excited about the responses last week at our kickoff event, and if you missed it, no worries. Everything's available on our website, which is www.thearcbaltimore.org, and this is some of what you'll find there. So we have a short video on Nadia Strawballs, one of the artists in this year's exhibit. There's a link to the virtual art gallery with an exhibit of 50 pieces of art, and I promise it's a really fun way to view the art. There's a link to handbid, so you can get registered to bid on the art, and a reminder that the silent auction opens next Monday. And there's a video about our Color Our World crowdfunding campaign to support the ARC's COVID relief work. If you have not yet contributed or considered your own personal fundraising page, it's all there and available to you. So we appreciate your contribution to our mission. At this time, we want to thank our presenting sponsor, Scientific Plant Service, for supporting this year's virtual event. We really hope that we see Brian Haga and his team in person next year. And thank you to our other top sponsors, the Miter Box, Wegmans, United Healthcare, Blades and Rosenfeld, Capital Services, Lockton, Mutual of America, PDP Group, and Summit Financial. And so without further ado, I'm going to say farewell and turn things over to our moderator for the evening, Mr. Chris Norline, our Director of Development here at the ARC, and our IT talent and brain behind this year's virtual event. So thank you so much, Chris, and take it away.
So IT talent is a little ironic with a 15-minute late technology start, but I wanted to welcome everyone joining us here for Curator Night. I personally am very excited. We're going to have a great hour of discussion that will not disappoint, so let's jump right in. We're fortunate to have 6 influential members of the Baltimore art community with us here tonight, and they're going to speak about a variety of topics. Each curator selected a piece of art from our Art in the Round exhibit, and we'll discuss why they made their decision. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on in their world, and we'll also have a discussion at the end about the intersection of art and disability. So let me just get the screen up here to the left. There we go. All right, so everybody should be able to see us as well as the individual artwork. So first off is George Ciscle, the curator in residence emeritus at the Maryland Institute College of Art, who has mounted groundbreaking exhibitions and taught courses in the fine arts and humanities for close to 50 years. He founded and directed the Contemporary, as well as the Exhibition Development Seminar, Curatorial Studies Concentration, and the MFA in Curatorial Practice at MICA. George selected Abstract Angels that you can see to your right by Chuck Fisher. So George, what drew you to that piece?
Well, at first glance, this is a sort of a painting composed of vibrant pink and blue abstractions. There's these shapes that sort of take form of a landscape with sky and ground. And I found that the title, Abstract Angel, that emerges from this sort of kind of a magical environment with their body and wings that you can see that contain various flowers and animals. But what intrigued me the most, I think, about this painting was the fractured globe of the world that the angel appears to almost be protecting from further harm. Perhaps Chuck Fisher, the artist, is bringing attention to the circumstances we are in now.
Thank you, George. I actually was fortunate enough to film an artist profile of Chuck that will debut at the event next Friday. And he's an incredible person, incredible artist, and I love his style. So thank you for the analysis on that. All right, let's see. So I'm going to go back to gallery view, and then we're going to spotlight Asma. So next up is Asma Naeem. She is the Eddie C. and C. Sylvia Brown Chief Curator. Sorry, let me make sure I move the screen. There we go. At the Baltimore Museum of Art. And she's a specialist in American art and contemporary Islamic art. Before this, she was the curator of prints, drawings, and media arts at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery. Many of her curated shows have won prestigious awards. Her work has been published in many prominent art magazines, and she has published 2 books on silhouettes and sound technology and power in American art. Asma selected Fireworks by Faith McLuckie. Asma, can you tell us why you like this painting?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Kathleen. And hello, ARC members. This is my first time being part of this special evening, and I'm thrilled. There were so many important, beautiful works to choose from, but on to Fireworks by Miss McLuckie because of the colors. The reds, the blues are really strident, and then you have that sharp contrast with the green purple. And for me, I immediately started to think of Gauguin and Van Gogh and the ways in which they were pushing against each other and playing with opposite color tones to create these really strident feelings. And that's the other thing that really drew me to this work is the feelings. It's titled Fireworks, and when you're watching fireworks, you kind of and looking up and seeing something quiet up into the air, and then there's a pause, and then suddenly everything shoots out in this beautiful array. And it's that kind of pause that I feel like we're leading up at the bottom of the work, and then we're suddenly in the spray, in that beautiful moment when things are popping out. And so you have these lines that are straight, and you have these lines that are squiggly. And it just made me think like I'm in the fireworks themselves, and I'm also kind of looking up at the fireworks themselves. So I like how she made us feel like we were part of it. And of course, since I write about sound, I felt like I could hear the sounds from the lines and the colors. So I thought it was a really magical work with a lot of emotion and a lot of heart and fire.
That's wonderful. I never even thought about the sound of when you're experiencing it. That's very interesting. Well, thank you, Asma. I appreciate that. So let's see, Gary, I'm going to unmute you, and then I'm going to spotlight you. So next is Gary Vikan, the retired director of the Walters Art Museum from 1994 to 2013. Gary was appointed by President Clinton in 1999 to his Cultural Property Advisory Committee and was knighted by the French Minister of Culture and the Order of Arts and Letters in 2002. In retirement, Gary writes, lectures, and teaches, and has published numerous books with his next being My Father Took Pictures, that's slated to be published in early 2021. Gary selected Blue Race Angel by Andrew Pope. Gary, can you tell us a little bit more about your selection?
Sure, I will. Hey, by the way, Chris, did you go to Villanova, or am I mistaken?
It's a mild obsession, yes.
Yes. Well, thank you. Good. It's good to be proud. I had Carleton on my shirt.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes. Well, 50 choices. It's hard. Mm-hmm. And there's so many good ones. And so I went through them quickly. And one of them really stuck with me the first time through. And I was puzzled by that. And then I remembered Malcolm Gladwell's book called Blink. And the idea is sort of like speed dating. The idea being that somehow there's some intuitive quality going on, a nonverbal part of your brain that makes decisions for you that you don't even have to articulate or think about. And I went through it again and again and again, and that blue fish kept coming up. Now, do I know why that was so? No. I'm interested in why that's so, and I'm sort of puzzled over it. I love the colors. I love the patterns. I love the kind of almost maniacal repeating of the scales and the fins. And that fish, to me, is sly. It's clever. And fishes always seem to be sly and clever. They seem to move effortlessly and somehow to be entertaining on purpose without trying. So what am I left with in the end? A puzzlement as to why I care about that one in particular, but an absolute conviction that I do, and I trust my intuition. So take that for what it's worth. Andrew Pope, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. All right. So next is Amy. I'm going to make sure I get you spotlit here. There we go. Perfect. So next is Amy Eva Raehse. She is the executive director and partner at Goya Contemporary Gallery. Raehse has curated over 100 exhibitions and has placed artworks in major public and private collections worldwide, including MoMA, the Met, and the Smithsonian, to name a few. In her 20 plus years in the field, Raehse has taught at a number of colleges and universities and lectures on professional practices, as well as sits on numerous boards. Amy selected Kids Playing by Gregory Bannister to our right. Amy, can you tell us a little bit more about your reaction to this piece?
Absolutely. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Kathleen, and my esteemed colleagues. And Gary, swipe my Villanova joke, so mad at you for that. But this was a difficult decision. There were so many spirited works. And I have to say that all of the artists should feel really, really, really good about what they've accomplished, and everybody should be celebrated equally. In my decision-making process, I eventually came to Gregory Bannister's work. It topped the chart for me because of its complexity and because of Gregory's authentic and humanistic approach to image making. In many ways, his work allows us to see as an active rather than a passive act, because it's very vivacious. And the work is incredibly engaging. Gregory's liberated and raw, even visceral marks, paired with his innovation and energy and experimentation, reveal Gregory's ability to tap into the depths of his pure emotion. And to me, that was pretty remarkable. I felt connected to the artist in a very personal way. Within his work, I saw hints or nods to celebrated and honored artists such as Dubuffet or Picasso or Basquiat, particularly when it came to Gregory's urgency of forms and his incredibly dynamic use of color. He took something that's in the vernacular of the everyday. He took children playing, and we can all relate to that. But what Gregory gives us beyond the imagery of children playing is that inner emotional connection to him, which also allows the viewer to connect to their own emotion. So I'm always appreciative of a work that reveals the courage that someone has to put their emotions forward, and also leaves plenty of room for the viewer to interpret. So for me, I thought Gregory's work was a knockout.
Thank you, Amy. We here at the Arc absolutely love Gregory, and him dropping off his artwork for submission is an event in and of itself, because we're always excited to see what he's bringing. So we all absolutely love this. So thank you.
Oh, I'd love to meet Gregory one day. I think he's probably a remarkable human being.
He is. He's fantastic.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you. Now we get a, Jeffrey, I'm going to unmute you, and then I'm going to spotlight you. Okay. All right. Perfect. So next is Jeffrey Kent. Jeffrey is an artist and the artistic director for the Peel Center for Baltimore History and Architecture. Kent combines dramatic gestures, vivid colors, multiple layers, pardon me if I pronounce this incorrectly, impasto, and reverse text in his paintings. His artworks are in the collections of National Academy of Sciences, Robert W. Deutsch Foundation, Hilton Hotels, FTI Consulting, among others. In addition, he founded and or owned Sub-Basement Artist Studios, Unexpected Art Space, Connect and Collect, and he is the Director of Promotion and Outreach for Be More Art. Jeffrey selected Sheep by Mara Clausen. Jeffrey, can you tell everyone why you made that selection?
Wow, well, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and again, thank all my colleagues. And I really love you, George Ciscle. I just want to say that in public. And I really appreciate this opportunity. You know, the second best thing that I love besides making art is looking at art. And this opportunity just helped that endeavor in my life of enjoyment. Mara's artwork came out to me mostly because of the color, the bold and powerful color, and the use of contrast, which is something that I'm automatically drawn to because it's something that I choose in the way that I express myself in my work. And the other things that drew me to this work was the fact that it reminded me of post-impressionism. Again, like Van Gogh, Munch, it has expressive power of color, and it also discards the idea of careful study and the efforts of color and light in nature. And I like how it's has this big, beautiful sheep that you can feel the fluffiness of it when you look at it. It's just so fluffy that if you thought of what a sheep feels like and you look at this painting, you automatically would think that is a fluffy sheep. And I just felt so fluffy looking at it. And I also thought that when I look at this painting, it brought a childhood memory. It brought two childhood memories, I should say. One was the fact of when I was really young and hanging out in the big sands of Cape Cod, the big grass in Cape Cod. And it kind of even though this is not a beach scene, it still had that feel of that memory for my youth. And also as a youth, the very first time I saw a Van Gogh painting was probably the wheat fields with crows. And it has that same feeling of that painting for me, I should say, because everyone brings their own expression and their own ideas when they look at art. And this is what I get. I love the colors of the rocks are orange and red and pinks and lavenders. And these are all very great feelings of they make me feel good when I look at them, these colors. And I really appreciate what Mara did in this work. And I also agree that it was very hard to select the work, but because I only had to choose one, I remembered seeing this one when I went through the list, and I went back to this one more than once, and it made it very easy for me. So I really thank Mara for making this work and all of the artists for giving me the opportunity to look at the work that they did.
Thank you, Jeffrey. This is probably my favorite as well. It's definitely one that stood out to me. So I love hearing your insight about it. Thank you. So last but not least, let me get Cara up here. All right, there we go. So last but not least is Cara Ober. Ober is an artist, an award-winning arts writer, curator, and the founding editor and publisher at Be More Art, Baltimore's art and culture magazine. She writes regularly about artist, museum, and material culture with emphasis on context and subtext in the art world. Ober has published articles in Vulture, New York Magazine, Art Papers, Art News, The Baltimore Sun, and many more. Cara has also taught classes and lectured at MICA, Johns Hopkins, American University, UMBC, and Goucher College. Cara selected Flower Without a Vase by Nadia Strasbaugh. Cara, what did you like about this piece?
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction, and thanks everybody. It's really fun to be in this context talking about this work tonight. And I want to make sure I'm pronouncing the artist's name correctly. And I think someone pronounced her name differently earlier. So it's Nadia Strasbaugh.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So with this particular painting, I was really attracted to the physicality of it. And by that, I mean, it looks like it wasn't painted with a brush. Mm-hmm. It looks like the artist used some sort of other tool, and I love sort of when I'm looking at a painting when I can see the material that was used and I have to figure it out. How did the artist do this? They didn't use a brush. And so to me, it looks like they did some sort of thing where they put a lot of paint on the canvas and created some sort of tool like a squeegee or a sponge or something, and kind of, they didn't mix the colors together, but they sort of blended them and made these energetic stripes across the canvas. So for me, immediately, this reminded me of like a Morris Lewis pour. It reminded me of the Washington Color School. And so this is a group, fairly local. Washington's close by, but in the 1950s and 60s, this group created these, very non-objective abstract works, and but they're not abstract expressionists, so they're much more orderly. There's sort of like there's a direction, there's a pattern, there's sort of an overwhelming structure to these paintings. So for me, this was something that I liked about this work as well. And then there's also this intense close-up view of a flower, and it's a very abstract floral shape, but you definitely see that in the very beginning. It's immediate, and I don't know, there's just this sensuality about the repetition and the sort of fluted shapes of those flowers. I thought it was feminine in a way that felt strong, and I liked the way the color and the form sort of merged together. And then initially I thought it was sort of on raw canvas, the way the color field painters would work. But then when you look closer, the artist actually took a lot of time in preparing a sort of neutral field behind those floral forms. And when you get in really close, and again, looking at art on a screen is not ideal. It's always ideal in person, or more ideal in person. Mm-hmm. But you can see all of these subtle details in the background where they have sort of this, just like a tan color that's sort of neutral, but then all of these other colors sort of embedded in it. And then it's interesting to see the colors sort of subtly in the background and then repeated in a much more, in a much stronger, brighter way, with the forms on top. And I don't know, it just looked like the artist was having a good time. They were experimenting with materials. Mm-hmm. It's not too perfect. It's not too neat, but it has a ton of just energy and spirit to it. So great. That was my pick.
Well, thank you, Cara. Coincidentally, the other artist profile that we debuted last week at our kickoff event is about Nadia and her process. So it will be very enlightening, so you can see how she does this type of artwork. She is fascinated with a variety of different mediums, so it's a very interesting artist. So thank you for that.
That's great.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on. Cara, we're going to stay with you because we have you up. Can you tell us what exciting things are happening with Be More Art magazine?
Sure. So yeah, it's been an interesting few months, and we have a team of 4 people that work for Be More Art full time, and then we have other partners and collaborators that we work with. Jeffrey is one of those people, and we really had to change our entire process to accommodate for COVID. So one of the things we do is we have an online magazine. So we produce stories every single day. So our team was pretty rapidly able to change the way that we work and work from home and create this content. And we really wanted to create stories that would support artists in Baltimore, and not just visual artists, but, chefs and restaurants and musicians. So we were really, we had a lot of fun sort of brainstorming ways that we could create stories that would make other people want to, buy art, support other artists, support other entities, so that these creative things and people and organizations are still here after COVID is over. So that was one goal. The other main thing that we do is we produce a print publication twice a year. So there were a lot of obstacles there once COVID hit, but what we did was end up designing a new subscription service, which is something we had never done, and just putting it out in front of our readers if they wanted to buy a subscription to get the next 2 issues. And then that gave us some stability. So we have issue 9 that just came out.
Oh, wow.
It's very beautiful. It has all sorts of art and artists and amazing work. So if you haven't seen it, I hope you'll check it out. And now we're steaming ahead towards issue 10 in December. The last thing I'll tell you about is Be More Art opened a gallery space last year called Connect and Collect. And the idea was to support artists and to try to make introductions between artists and people who collect, and also to inspire new collectors. And after our second show opened, everything had to be shut down. And we still, here's my dog's tail here. We still haven't been able to have people into the space. But what we've done, it has huge glass windows that face onto Charles Street. And even in the first 2 shows, we had artists create installation work specific for that window. So now what we've done is we had the windows frosted and we purchased a projector. So now we are screening artists' videos, animations, slideshows of work, and it's every night in these giant windows in the front of our space. So the space is 2519 North Charles, so it's in Lower Charles Village. And if you're driving up Charles Street after it's dark, you can see the art. So we've had a few outdoor socially distant receptions, and it's just felt really good to put art in front of people that wouldn't normally see it, and to, give artists an opportunity to continue showing their work. But, for a lot of people, they don't even go to events. So at least people can be inside their cars, they can drive by, and they can experience this work. So that's it. That's all. We've been busy. It's been good. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Cara, for sharing. That's very exciting.
Sure.
All right, so we're gonna go over to Jeffrey. Spotlight. All right, great. So thank you, Cara. We're going to continue in reverse order that we started. So Jeffrey, what is happening with either your own work or your work at the Peel Center?
Wow. Let's see. My ongoing art practice is still happening. I'm working on an autobiography through telling my story through my art. So it's really a long process of making art to tell a story. So it's really a long process. The other thing with the Peel, I guess I'll just jump into that. Just finished putting together, installing an exhibition of an artist. Her name is Kim Rice. She's a Baltimore-based artist, a transplant that recently moved here, that I met at one of the Connect Collect events that we had at the gallery. I guess it was the first artist event or public event that we had at the gallery. And I did a studio visit with her, and her work just knocked me out, primarily because it was work by a white artist that was informed by white privilege in a way that goes as far back as her great-great-grandfather's will, which is on exhibit and cut out of a colonial map, and cast a shadow of the will on the wall, which has people gifted, or whatever you do, inheritance. As a matter of fact, that's the name of the exhibition, Inheritance, Kim Rice Inheritance. So that I'm really proud of her work, and proud of the opportunity to present this body of work, because I mean, it's mostly conceptual work that she has some of the works are, for example, she's taken magazines and cut out all of the white flesh of magazines and woven them into large tapestries that are like museum-sized tapestries. I mean, they're really huge, 13-foot pieces. She has a piece that she created that makes the shape of the Mississippi River. She was once a resident of New Orleans during Katrina. As a matter of fact, she moved from there during Katrina. And she points out how, because she's white, she was able to move to Baltimore, finance a home in Canton, and so forth and so on. So I'm pretty proud of that work at the Peel. It'll be up until the end of the year of this year, 2020. And also just working with artists and trying to help lift other artists here in Baltimore as much as possible, and working with Cara as much as possible to try to, again, create and make inclusion for artists and people of color here in Baltimore. Which, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Jeffrey. That was very interesting. I'm very excited to see that installation or the exhibition.
Oh, so please go to thepeel.org and schedule a private. We are doing private small groups of 5 or less to see the exhibition. So anyone can schedule a tour, which we will try to make it possible so that I can be there to give you a private tour.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to Amy. Amy, can you tell us what's happening at the Goya Contemporary Gallery?
Sure thing. Well, in this interminable pandemic, we've been trying to be as supportive and productive as possible, including porch drops of food and supplies to artists with whom we work, who have some physical limitations. We've been facilitating a lot of legacy projects for the artists that we work with, because we fully commit to our artists for a lifetime of support, protection, and fiduciary responsibility. We just released a 144-page artist book for the South African-born, Baltimore-based artist Joe Smale. And Joe currently has an exhibition up in our gallery spaces at Goya Contemporary, and then we also have her work up in a show at the Baltimore Museum of Art. The Baltimore Museum of Art's exhibition is much more of a retrospective look at Joe's work, where our work in our space is more of a current view of her practice from the last about 10 to 12 months. And the book is in celebration of both exhibitions and also in celebration of representing Joe and her career for over 25 years. So we've also been moving a fairly analog business to digital culture, because much of the work that we show and represent is really meant to be seen in person. So moving works on to a digital platform is not always easy, but we've developed a program that we are creating content for collector groups and museum friends groups. So we do digital tours through our archives, through studio visits of artists, and through the gallery. And we do collector tours and museum friend groups tours about once a week. We've been working with several museums on exhibitions for other artists that we represent as well. MacArthur Genius Fellow Joyce J. Scott, who we've represented as her primary gallery for 20 years. Elizabeth Talford Scott, who George is more than familiar with, since he did the seminal show of Elizabeth Talford Scott's work years back. And then Sonia Clark, who we work with and will open up her show at the Museum of Women in the Arts towards the end of this year, actually. So that's all pretty exciting. We're also in the midst of the IFPDA Print Fair. IFPDA is the acronym for International Fine Print Dealers Association. That event is typically at the Park Avenue Armory and the Javits Center in New York, but because of COVID, had to move online. The event's pretty interesting because it hosts the world's top print dealers who are selected to be part of this organization because their focus is on integrity, ethics, and scholarship around editions and prints. So we're happy to be in the middle of that, and moving it online has been interesting, but everybody's been fluid and amazing throughout all of these processes. And then we're gearing up for the larger November auctions. We have a secondary market practice where we work closely with Phillips Sotheby's and Christie's auction houses, and where personally I'm doing a lot of writing. I'm part of a think tank in New Jersey that I'm excited about. And I've done more cooking in my non-domestic life than I've ever done in 46 plus years. So the pandemic has brought me basically to a new vernacular of ingredients, which I'm kind of treating like a painting. So
Wonderful.
that's what I've been up to, and that's what we've been up to.
Well, thank you, Amy. Thank you for sharing. All right, so Gary, we're going to move on to you. I'm going to ask to unmute. So Gary, would you like to share what's going on in your world?
I would, if I knew. When I retired from Walter Low those many years ago, I was intent on becoming a writer. And I think I have become a writer, at least to the extent that a writer writes books, and I've written books. And I think we've gotten better at writing since I started writing. So in both cases, I think I'm in a new career. One book came out, the third one since I retired, in May of this year. It's on the Shroud of Turin. And A Brilliant Hoax in the Time of the Black Death is its title. And my fourth one comes out either at the end of this year or early next year, and it's called My Father Took Pictures. And it's my childhood memoir from the time I have my first memories around 1950 to the time I went to college in 1964. My father was the publisher and photographer for a small newspaper in northern Minnesota. And when he died, he left me a couple thousand negatives and several hundred prints. And it's from these that I have reconstructed my life and growing up years in this little town. And that was a pleasure to write. And as I say, that's coming out at the end of this year or early next year. I also have a kind of avocational interest in art and the brain. This started when I was still at the Walter, and we did a couple small exhibitions devoted to the intersection of brain science and the aesthetic experience. Beauty in the Brain was one of them, and then that kind of grew into a session at the Salzburg Global Seminar that I co-chaired with a neuroscientist from Hopkins a couple years back. And my most recent stab at this, and I was involved in the creation of a neuroaesthetic center at Johns Hopkins University, which I think is the first in the United States and the second in the world. But my most recent interest in how the brain works with art is an article I wrote called Icons in the Brain, and it's about how we see faces and how the faces we see, we translate into affect or emotions and a kind of emotive interaction. And it's a kind of very tentative field, but I find it very exciting. And I really enjoy being involved with people who care about that intersection. These are people who are involved in brain science, brain chemistry, and yet are drawn to art, or in a few cases, and they're very rare, I think, people who are involved in art and care about brain function. So I'm in the latter category, and it's a new field, and I find it kind of interesting, and I feel lucky to be part of it. So that's sort of what I'm up to.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Thank you, Gary, for sharing. I appreciate that. Asma, now, let's move on to you. I'm going to unmute and then spotlight. There we go. All right, so what's happening in your world at the Baltimore Museum of Art?
Gosh, a lot. So I'm going to start with the virtual because we have created a suite of virtual experiences and platforms for our audiences to enjoy during this unprecedented time. And we have two that are particularly of interest, I hope, for your viewers. One is the BMA Salon, which offers a connection to a number of artists and artist collectives and galleries in Baltimore. And we're pleased to have several people represented in this chat tonight. So we have a number of works that you can link to and purchase through the BMA Salon website platform. And you can support local artists and local galleries. And then we also have the BMA Screening Room, which is an online platform to watch short films created by Baltimore-based artists. And that is truly an incredible way to pass time if you've binged everything, or even if you haven't binged everything that is possible. And I to say that Jeffrey Kent has 3 works up on our BMA Screening Room website. So run, do not walk to your laptop to watch those. So that's one of our virtual experiences. If you want to kind of move from the laptop into your actual physical space and come towards the museum, we have an array of outdoor experiences that we've created in a walking tour, starting with the most beloved of gardens and ending with our spring house on our other end of the campus, and the west side of the campus, where we're featuring a wonderful animated film. Excuse me. And I will also say that we have opened, and it's been about, I think, in a graduated state. We have now opened approximately 70% of the building, and we are welcoming visitors to 3 exhibitions that have opened. The most recent one is Stripes and Stars, Reclaiming Lakota Independence, which looks at these incredible beadwork objects made by the Lakota people of North and South Dakota at a time when the United States government was oppressing them and taking away many of their freedoms. And the beadwork is quite beautiful, inspiring, and includes patriotic imagery. We also have an exhibition devoted to the second female director, Adeline Breeskin. And that exhibition primarily looks at the works that brought in, which were an extraordinary amount, from the Cone collection to her work in commissioning the U.S. Pavilion for the 1960 Venice Biennale, to some really wonderful, stunning prints that I could just spend hours looking at. And lastly, we have A Perfect Power, Motherhood and African Art that just opened. This is a landmark show featuring an unprecedented amount of loans and collection objects that talk about the ways in which power in the central belt of Africa was passed through the line, the maternal line, and the power was expressed through those gendered forms. It's very beautiful, and next week we hope to open Candice Bright's Too Long Didn't Read, which looks at issues of immigration and our very short attention span. And speaking of a short attention span, I realize I have gone on, and I will turn it over to George.
Okay, great. I'm gonna thank you so much, Asma. That was fantastic. All right, I'm gonna unmute George and then spotlight him. So George, tell us what's happening in your travels around the art community.
Well, I would say, like, prior to March the 15th, my whole life was really around my volunteer work, especially with the ARC and last year's Beyond the Four Walls campaign that raised enough money for me to start a mentorship program with professional artists working with artists from ARC, and also a fellowship for the curatorial practice program working with the day centers from ARC, and also my monthly ARC visits with the day centers at the BMA, the Walters, Baltimore Clay Works, and School 33. Since March 15th, however, things certainly have shifted, and they really are 100% about art in the round. And trying to, in the selection, the promotion, and the sale of the 50 artist works that certainly our wonderful colleagues and friends tonight were a major part of. And then the crowd source fundraising campaign, the Color Our World campaign that Kathleen referred to, that the organization is trying to raise $50,000 on, and of that, I have my personal fundraising goal of $5,000 to raise from friends and colleagues, hopefully to reach that. So that's really been my concentration and focus, which I'm really happy to be able to have that at this point in time.
Great. Thank you, George. And thank you for being instrumental in getting such incredible speakers here tonight that are also curators as part of our event. So thank you so much. We owe a debt of gratitude to you. So I'm going to go back to gallery view so we can finish up on our third part. So to close out our event, we wanted to have a discussion on how disability and art intersect. And George wanted to open this up. He's been instrumental in bridging these two worlds through his volunteer work with the ARC and many other disability organizations in Baltimore. So I'll let you take it away, and we can start.
Thank you, Chris. This certainly did start with a conversation that I had with you about the representation of artists with disabilities in the larger art community. And I myself have been questioning what happens if and when we are free from labels of artists with disabilities or those identified as outsider artists. So I'd like to sort of open it up for sort of just a informal, free-form conversation with the fellow curators here to chime in whenever you like, or take it in a different direction if it relates to your work or practice around accessibility and representation.
Don't be shy.
Okay, so I was going to say, I could start with that from my own perspective. Being coming from the background that I come from, single parent, Northwest Baltimore, grew up in the hood, sold drugs, did all these things, had learning disabilities. Speaking of disability, I know you may be just speaking of, I don't know if we're talking about physical disability or mental disability, or is disability just a thing that we're talking about?
Yeah, the full spectrum.
But accessibility and feeling left out is something I always grew up with here in Baltimore. I never felt that Micah was reachable for me. I never felt that the life that I have was reachable. So I'm sure there are many people today that are growing up with the same feelings that I had of insecurity, but have much talent and have this inner glow that they want to share, but may have so much pain and trauma from being different that it makes it difficult. So how do we make it more accessible and inclusive for people who have challenges that we, the normal, do not? That's a question I guess I will present to people who are more experienced in this world than I am.
And just to, not to interrupt you, but just to add on that, Jeffrey, in terms of the work that the Peel has been doing recently around issues of accessibility with people with both intellectual, developmental, and physical disabilities, they have really reached out into the community to do that. Even the exhibition before you did down there was dealing with the 30th anniversary of the ADA.
Right, exactly. With Audrey Buck. And that was very interesting in itself, in that fact that a lot of things, even for this presentation tonight, one of the things I was thinking about is how we didn't, I guess because I don't know what the audience is, but we can't take for granted that the audience always can see or hear what's being presented. And one of the things that Nancy has been very influential in trying to present for us as a team, to always, when we're on Zooms, to discuss and describe ourselves, our surroundings, and to try to present a picture for people who can't see, who may just be listening, which gives them an opportunity to be included. But around, I think the conversation also is about how to make art more, I mean, the art of people who have differences and disabilities, because even people with disabilities, they appreciate the term disability, which is something I've recently learned. How do we make it more for artists who have disabilities to be shown to the public, curated, exhibited?
And the concept of this curation started when we met with George, and he's been able to bring these artists to a much higher platform, to a much larger audience, and that's been huge for the many artists that submit for the exhibition and inevitable auction. So that's the one thing that I'm grateful for from George. And I think just hearing all of your analysis earlier in the program about the artwork, it was done respectfully and professionally, and in no way, out of pity or anything along those lines. It was very respectful, and that.
Also, just to add to that, Chris, the ARC is not an insular institution, and they really are looking to have what they refer to as their clients out into the world, into the real world. And so part of that was the larger community, meaning, the Walters and the BMA and, School 33 and Clayworks, who opened up their arms and said, yes, please. That was a major impact to the people from ARC in terms of what they were exposed to in terms of materials and techniques and mentorships.
Yeah, I was going to add that actually in our most recent print issue, the theme of the issue is craft, but we really broadly interpret what that might mean and specific to Baltimore. But one of the stories that we included is about make studios. And so in some ways similar with, differently abled artists, people that are making art to show and to sell. And for us, it was really important that this story was part of this issue, but also just that we, the way that we're writing about it is the same way that we're writing about any other art. So I was going to show you, this is like one of my favorite pages of this work. Yes, that is Hulk Hogan. Wait, there's one more. I'm going to show you one more. But even this work is so fantastic, and it's detailed, and these are all artists and it's all art. So it feels good to just have as much diversity in terms of the artists that we're looking at and writing about as possible. So,
Cara, I'm not sure if you realize that both Amy's artist and my artist that we chose, 2 of the 6 art curators' choices are make studio artists.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that.
Yeah. And there's a couple others. There are a couple others among the other 50 that also from Make Studio. They have a
That's
very
great.
ARC and Make Studio has established a really good collegial relationship because of that.
Amy, did you have something you were going to say? I'm sorry.
I did. I was actually going to point out that art, it tells the story of our time, and we really cannot tell the story of our time without a diverse group of artists. So where artists are excluded because of race, because of religion, because of sexuality, because of challenges or cognitive differences, we fail in telling that full story of our time. So I think part of what we need to always remind all of our colleagues is that our differences are really our strengths. And as visual thinkers, not everything is articulated through the same path. And if we allow ourselves to be more fluid, to accept many different ways of obtaining knowledge, then we become greater communicators across the board in every discipline. And that, to me, is what working towards inclusion is about, because representation isn't always inclusion. Inclusion is about feeling that you belong, that people want to hear your voice. Being there isn't always the same as being included. And so, we have to really do the work to make sure that all voices are included.
That's actually part of our vision for the ARC Baltimore is that people are finding meaning and that their voices are heard, and that they are valued. It just mirrored exactly. Our vision was mirroring exactly what you just said. So thank you.
I have to add, in the 90s, I was working with the Worcester Art Museum. And at that time, I was connected to, that in Massachusetts, I was connected to a respite home called Seven Hills. And I had developed a program with the Worcester Art Museum. And our clients were adults who were cognitively challenged. And what we did was we brought our clients into the museum. They engaged with the collection and then went to the museum studios to make art after. And I have to say that for me, it was one of the most valuable experiences in my life because I personally learned so much about being open to all sorts of new ways of coming at looking at artwork. And I think, we all have to remind ourselves we have different experiences, and each experience is valuable and contributes to culture. We're all part of culture.
Absolutely. Gary, I think you had your hand up as well, that you wanted to say something.
Yes, with the idea that a disability in the world may be an ability in the art world, and Van Gogh is a perfect example, but I just read a biography of Glenn Gould, famous for the Goldberg Variations, the pianist who died in 1983. And he had many, many challenges in his life. And in some respects couldn't function in the world. But it was that very mix of things in his head that made him a uniquely capable interpreter of Bach. And Beethoven was on the spectrum. He was the kind of person that if he didn't have his music, I can't imagine what life he would have had. So, in a way, art is a peculiar manifestation of the human spirit. And I don't think anybody has proprietorial ownership on the channel that leads you to that outcome. And so, and George, I'm not the least bit surprised you do this. If anybody in the last 30 years of my professional life in this town has been driven by values, the intersection of values and professionalism, you are that person. So, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Absolutely. Well, I think that might be. Oh, Asma? Did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
I don't think that I don't think I can follow all of the beautiful words that have been and particularly the shining example that George brings to this conversation. But I will say that the stigmatization that comes with being considered not able-bodied, something that we are trying to address head-on in the museum, both in terms of our visitors, in terms of the practitioners whom we feature, and also in terms of staff. And there's a lot of work to be done. And the fact that we have a valuable institution, advocates here in Baltimore City, is something that I think is very important. And I will also say that art is the universal language, as we all know. And it doesn't matter what you look like or what you can or your body can or cannot do, but it can always reach that divide. And so I very much believe in the power of art and in the power of folks who feel invisible to express themselves. And I'm here for those reasons.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for sharing. I think that's a perfect point to finish up. So on behalf of the ARC Baltimore, the artists with disabilities represented tonight as part of this Curator Night, as well as the many other artists as part of the exhibition, I wanted to thank our esteemed guests for their participation in this event. This went far better, even with the technical glitch at the beginning, which I appreciate you all for being patient. But this was fantastic, and I thought it was some really incredible discussion at the end there. So thank you all for being open and sharing your own personal connection to this topic. So we hope to see many of you that are watching with us next week for our closing event for Art in the Round. The gallery is open and up on our website, and bidding can start on Monday throughout the week. So we hope you join us next Friday for the closing of Art in the Round. So thank you to everyone, and good night, and have a wonderful Friday and weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.